The morning air in the northern Cascades was crisp and damp, blanketing the forest in a silver fog that clung to the towering firs like whispers from the sky. The golden leaves of autumn rustled softly in the breeze, while the distant murmur of a mountain stream traced melodies through the silence. Ethan Hayes, a seasoned ranger of Mount Baker National Forest, moved steadily through the woodland path, his boots familiar with the cold earth, his heart quietly tethered to the rhythms of the wild. He wasn't a man of many words, nor one who sought company. After years of loss and solitude, he found solace not in people, but in pine needles, bird song, and snowfall. To Ethan, nature was the only place that hadn't lied to him. It was raw, unforgiving, but honest. Then it came. The sound. Faint, broken, almost swallowed by the trees. A high-pitched whimper. Not wind, not water. A cry. Fragile. Desperate. He stopped, instinct stilling his breath. Somewhere beyond the ridge, something was suffering. And in that one moment, as silence bent to sorrow, Ethan knew. This patrol wouldn't be like the others. What he found next would test everything he believed about mercy, fear, and what it truly means to protect. The sound grew clearer as Ethan descended the slope, his boots crunching softly over pine needles and broken twigs. Each step brought a deeper sense of urgency. That whimper wasn't an echo of the woods. It was pain. Real, immediate, and close. He paused behind a mossy boulder, squinting through the veil of mist, heart pounding like the echo of distant drums. Then he saw it. Just beyond a thicket of ferns, half shrouded in fog and rust-colored leaves, sat a steel cage, crudely welded, dusted in dried blood and pine sap. A trap, illegal no doubt, left by poachers with no regard for the law or the lives they shattered. Inside, curled in a trembling ball, was a bear cub. Tiny, maybe 6 months old. Its left paw was caught in the vice-like jaws of the cage's pressure latch, blood seeping steadily into the damp earth. The cub's fur was matted and torn, but its eyes, those wide amber eyes, were the ones that stopped Ethan cold. They didn't reflect wildness or threat, just fear, and something worse, hope. Ethan instinctively reached for the rifle slung over his back. His training took over before thought could. His fingers wrapped around the cold metal. His body dropped into position. One clean shot. That's what he'd been taught. But he didn't pull the trigger. The cub made a soft, pitiful sound, somewhere between a breath and a cry. And Ethan felt something shift inside him. Not pity, not hesitation, recognition. He lowered the rifle. "I'm not going to do this," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "Not today." His breath fogged the air as he stepped forward, slowly, cautiously. The cub didn't retreat or growl. It just stared at him, shaking. One paw twitching in the metal, the other resting against its belly like a child curled up in pain. Ethan's voice was calm now, barely audible. "It's okay, little one. I see you." And somehow, in that moment, it felt like the forest saw him too. A man not holding a gun, but holding a choice. He took off his gloves. His hands trembled slightly. The forest was silent, watching. He kneeled beside the cage, not as a hunter, not as an officer of the law, but simply, profoundly, as a human being. The cold metal of the trap pressed against Ethan's palm as he leaned in to examine the mechanism. He had seen snares like this before, cruel devices designed not to kill quickly, but to hold, to punish, to break. The cub let out another whimper, its tiny chest rising and falling too fast. Time was running out. Then the radio on his hip crackled to life, slicing through the silence like a blade. "Unit 4, do you copy?" A voice buzzed, low and urgent. "We've got unverified prints in your zone. Possible sow in proximity. If you found a cub, you're in danger. Protocol is clear. Secure the area. Neutralize the threat if necessary. Neutralize. The word landed like a hammer in Ethan's chest. The threat? Was this little creature in front of him, bleeding, crying, trembling, truly a threat? He glanced at the cub again. It was trying to lift its injured paw, wincing in pain, then curling in again like it couldn't bear to exist anymore. Something inside Ethan buckled. His eyes burned. And then, without warning, a memory returned, sharp as frost and just as cutting. His son, Liam, age 5, curled up in a hospital bed, bald from chemo, eyes red from crying. "Daddy," he had whispered one night, clutching Ethan's hand with the same desperation. "It hurts too much." The same eyes, the same helplessness. Ethan staggered back slightly, overwhelmed. He turned off the radio without answering. His breath came out in uneven clouds. If he followed orders, if he pulled the trigger now, there would be no paperwork, no penalty. It would be by the book, just another day in the field. But if he saved this cub, he'd be breaking protocol. Maybe even endangering himself. Gaumi ko the jen batku luk now. The risk wasn't small. Yet in that moment, the weight of the gun in his hands felt heavier than it ever had before. Ethan looked around the forest. The trees said nothing. The wind held its breath. He dropped the rifle. "I already lost one life I couldn't save," he murmured, kneeling back down beside the cage. "I'm not losing this one too." Then, with steady hands and a pounding heart, Ethan pulled a multi-tool from his belt and chose mercy over method. The multi-tool clicked open in Ethan's trembling hand, its dull blade reflecting the muted light filtering through the canopy above. With slow precision, he began to work on the trap. The metal was old, rusted, and resistant, as if the forest itself resented its presence. Every twist of the hinge, every reluctant creak of the steel felt like a defiance of the cruelty that had brought it here. The cub flinched once, but didn't fight. Its breath came in shallow waves, the soft rise and fall of its chest brushing against the bars. Ethan murmured softly. Not words, really. Just sound. A low, steady rhythm meant more to calm himself than the cub. Still, the little bear's eyes flicked to him with a look that could only be described as trust. And then, a snap. The trap gave way with a metallic sigh and the paw slipped free. Blood oozed gently from the gash. Ethan reached for his pack, pulling out a faded field kit, more suited for scraped knees and hiker blisters than torn animal flesh. But it would have to do. He cleaned the wound with bottled water, grimacing as the cub whimpered. He wrapped the paw with a strip of gauze and an old, clean sock. The cub made no sound of protest. Instead, it leaned forward, pressing its damp muzzle against Ethan's coat, tucking its face into the crook of his arm as if it had found something it hadn't felt in days. Warmth. Safety. A heartbeat that didn't mean harm. By now the light was fading fast. Shadows lengthened across the forest floor, and the familiar chill of dusk crept down the back of Ethan's neck. He looked around. The risk was still very real. A mother bear could emerge from the woods at any moment. But the cub could no longer walk. It wouldn't survive the cold night alone. Ethan gathered the tiny creature in his arms, cradling it against his chest like something sacred. Its body was light, but its presence weighed on him like a vow. He hiked the last mile back to his remote ranger cabin in silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the soft crackle of pine cones beneath his boots. Inside, he lit the wood stove, laid a wool blanket beside it, and gently placed the cub down. It curled immediately, letting out a breath that sounded almost like relief. Ethan sat beside it, the firelight dancing across his weathered face. Tonight, the rules could wait. Tonight, he chose compassion over command. The fire had burned low by the time dawn crept over the mountaintops, turning the snow-dusted evergreen silver. Ethan sat slouched in the old wooden chair beside the stove, the bear cub nestled in sleep at his feet. The cabin was quiet, save for the soft crackle of embers and the slow rhythmic breathing of the little creature he had saved. And then, a sound. Subtle, but unmistakable. A shift of weight on pine needles. A breath. Deep, low, ancient. Ethan's eyes snapped open. He turned slowly toward the window, the glass fogged slightly from the warmth inside. There she was. Gaomi. A silhouette at first, half hidden in the mist rising from the tree line. But then, the light caught her eyes, twin embers glowing through the veil, wild and watchful. Her fur was dark with morning dew, her breath visible in the cold air. She stood still, unmoving, but every muscle beneath her thick coat was coiled, waiting. Ethan didn't move. He knew what one wrong gesture could mean. He had seen what panic looked like in the wild, and right now he wasn't staring at a beast. He was staring at a mother, one who had followed the scent of her child across a frozen night. The cub stirred, its nose twitched, its ears perked. Then, without hesitation, it rose, still limping, still weak, but with unmistakable urgency. It made a low, trembling sound and padded across the floor to the door. Ethan swallowed hard. He rose slowly, his body stiff with exhaustion and nerves, and unlatched the cabin door. It creaked open on its hinges. Cold air flooded in. The cub stepped outside. The forest held its breath. And then, no growl, no charge, no violence. The mother lowered her massive head. The cub stopped just short of her. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then, softly, like a whispered prayer, their noses touched. It was not dramatic, not fierce. It was simple and pure, and enough. Ethan exhaled. His hands were still shaking. The mother bear turned her eyes to him, deep, wild, unreadable. But in them, he didn't see threat. He saw recognition, not trust, not forgiveness, but something in between. She turned, slow and silent, and melted back into the trees with her cub limping behind her. And just like that, the forest reclaimed what was hers. The forest was quiet again. The mist had lifted, and in its place was a stillness that felt almost sacred. Ethan stood at the doorway of his cabin long after the last paw print had disappeared into the underbrush. His rifle remained slung across his shoulder, untouched, unused, and somehow heavier for it. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just breathed. When he returned to the ranger station that afternoon, his uniform smelled faintly of smoke and pine, and his eyes carried something no report could ever describe. A fellow officer looked up and asked, half curious, half routine, "Did you fire?" Ethan paused. "No," he said simply. "I chose not to give my heart another scar." They didn't ask further, because some choices don't need to be defended. Some moments don't need to be explained. Later that evening, as he sat alone on the porch of the cabin, watching the treetops sway with the wind, Ethan felt no triumph, no regret, just the quiet echo of something ancient and wordless that had passed between him and the bear. In the wilderness, when a man lowers his weapon and opens his heart, even the fiercest mother will understand. And in her silence, perhaps, she said thank you.